has it, he's the one I'm leaving you for.
Now, it's a genuine pleasure to invite on my stand-up guest. He's absolutely fantastic. I used to share rooms with him in Edinburgh, so it's a genuine pleasure to have him on. So please welcome the wonderful Andy Zaltzman from the Bugle podcast. On 3, 1, 2, 3!
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. How are you all? So, are you all glad to be alive? Oh, excellent. That takes a bit of pressure off me as a comedian. What I'm going to attempt to do over the course of the next 15 minutes or so is solve all of the world's greatest social and political problems, thereby bringing an end to all human conflict. Well, I was slightly relying on you being a little bit more excited. Too little, too late. Too little, too late. Clearly quite a lot of war fans in tonight. Some of you clearly thinking, well, Andy, peace is all very well in theory, but in practice it simply doesn't work. Because what does peace generally lead to? War. Whereas many wars do in fact end up in peace. So give war a chance. That seems to be the vibe of the Good News show this evening. Maybe you've got a point. I mean, let's take a look at the First World War as a classic example of this. I mean, yes, there were 4 years of gruesome fighting, but what about the 21 years of glorious peace that followed it? That is an 84% success rate. How many of us in our chosen lines of work can claim 84% success? I know I can't. If I could, then realistically, I wouldn't be telling jokes like this one. I'm quite a pessimistic man. In that respect, I'm like a German vegetarian. I fear the worst. So that's what I'll be attempting to do, solve all the world's great problems. Let's start with Britain first. Are you excited about the alternative vote referendum? Well, that little thing is really capturing the public imagination, isn't it? Very much in the same way that a baby spider captures an Apache helicopter in its web. Actually, do you actually even like democracy? Let's do this by vote. Raise your hands if you do like democracy. OK, and raise your hands if you don't like it. So, even in that vote, when all you had to do to express your opinion was go to the trouble of lifting a single limb, we still only managed to round about a 35% turnout. Watch how deep the rivers of apathy are coursing through this proud democratic nation. I think it's a real shame because they're trying to rebuild trust in our political system, and we become alienated from party politics. And the extent to which we have become alienated from party politics is proved by the fact that there are more suicides during party conference season than during the rest of the year put together. Now, that is a lie, but my point stands. They say they're trying to rebuild trust, and it needs to be rebuilt. It's been shattered, and the level of debate in this referendum has been pitiful. Pretty much the same level of debate you get between yourself and your dog when you're trying to train it to crap outside. Very basic and driven by self-interest. They are trying to rebuild trust, because for too long, politicians have felt alien to us. The common complaint is that politicians play God. And I guess when you think about it, they do play God, politicians, in the sense that they are not believed in by the vast majority of the public anymore. They haven't done anything demonstrably useful for absolutely ages. They seem to have developed an incredible ability to live in multiple places at the same time. And they keep employing members of their own family in influential positions. Truly uncanny. I'm not saying that Jesus wasn't the best man for the job. I'm just saying it would have been nice if there'd been a little more transparency in the recruitment process. I'm from a Jewish background, but I do know a bit about Jesus, who, as far as I recall, was a prominent turn of the first millennium Middle East-based magician and raconteur. I think it's a real shame that we've become so disillusioned with politics. I actually love democracy. In fact, if anything, I think I love it a little bit too much, because when I voted in the last general election, I simply could not control myself. I just lost it totally in the polling station. I don't know what it was. I think it was the raw, primeval excitement of being able to write the letter X in a small box next to the name of someone I'd never heard of. thus expressing my political opinions in the most meaningless and imprecise way available. It was simply too much for me. I was overwhelmed by this maelstrom of democratic ecstasy. I sliced the end off my finger and I wrote an X in blood next to every single candidate on the ballot paper. I then flipped the ballot paper over and wrote out the names of the entire 1981 Ashes-winning England cricket team, and I voted for them as well. Hell yeah, I screamed. This is why I fought all those world wars. I then attempted to jump into the ballot box and hibernate amongst the votes. But it's interesting, you know, the coalition is being sort of forced apart by this. It's being driven apart on a number of issues. Immigration, for one, the most infantile of all political issues in Britain, immigration, particularly when you think of all the doctors the NHS has stolen from overseas. I think most illegal immigrants only come to Britain to see their local GP. Let's grow up about it, don't you think? You know, the media drive this. The media are amazingly childish about immigration. In fact, just the other day, there was a story in one of the tabloid newspapers which suggested that all asylum seekers should be cryogenically frozen until the situation in their home countries has calmed down. Then they can be fired home out of a special humanitarian cannon and just allowed to thaw out gently in the sun. Which doesn't sound that unreasonable, does it? Till the next day, another one of the tabloids pointed out that no one is going to want that freezer in their town. How childish we've become about this issue. And there's going to be a split in the coalition about it. The Liberal Democrats, they wanted an amnesty for illegal immigrants. So they said that if you've been here for 10 years, you come out, tell us where you are, become part of the system, and you'll be allowed to stay. And the Conservatives said, no, all illegal immigrants must be repatriated, even if we don't know where they are. So, as far as I can make out, the two policies were the Liberal Democrats saying, we will find them and we won't send them home, and the Conservatives saying, we won't find them, but we will send them home. So, there's going to have to be compromise, isn't there? There will have to be maybe 50-50, maybe we won't find them and we won't send them home, which, of course, is the status quo. So much for change. And they'll be driven apart by the cuts as well. Are you enjoying being... Has anyone here been cut? I think the ultimate end game is to cut absolutely everything. And I guess, you know, maybe they've got a point, because, you know, do we need schools, for example? You know, we have Wikipedia. Schools are now just a waste of decent real estate. Do we need the NHS? Surely there's enough people alive in the world as it is, without the NHS dragging us out longer and longer. We already can't afford pensions, and with medical science improving as it is, within 50 years, it will be almost impossible to die. And every single travel bulletin will simply say there's long tailbacks heading into Switzerland. Do find an alternative euthanasia clinic if you can. And you look at the state of the world economy as well. I think that's another source of considerable discomfort. Now, I don't understand economics, and I sincerely hope I die that way. I believe that is the correct way to live your life. But I've tried to understand what's happened to the global economy in recent years, because I think there's some very important questions that need to be asked about the global economy. For example, why did global markets collapse faster than a prim Victorian lady at the unexpected sight of a gentleman's danglers? Why did share prices go down faster than a buttered baby down a well-waxed water slide? I can't tell you how much empirical research went into that joke. And why did the whole global economic system go to pieces like a cheap, flimsy jigsaw in a fist fight on an old bus going down a bumpy road during a big earthquake? If there's a glut of contrived similes flooding onto the market at the same time during a gig, could that cause a catastrophic crash in the subsequent value of... sorry, ignore that line. If there's... Let me do that one again. To be honest, that won't work now, after that little hiatus. If you want to know how that routine was going to go, if you leave your email addresses on the way out, I will email you the full script of that routine as it was supposed to go. Then you could then email me back with how much you think you would have laughed at it. Just like ha, ha, ha in all the gaps. And then I'll forward your responses on to everyone else who was here tonight, and then you can collectively factor that laugh into your memory of my set. Deal? Good. But, thanks so much. It seems to me that the answer to all these questions, from my layman's point of view, is that the whole of global economics is based on bullshit. It is based on figments and fictions and people gambling on stuff that essentially doesn't exist. And essentially what happened was that capitalism got a little bit overexcited in the aftermath of its points victory over communism in the Cold War, in which it had been helped by the fact that communism spent the entire fight standing in the corner punching itself in the face. And capitalism then got overexcited, waltzed into a casino and put absolutely everything on red, whilst muttering to itself, "Don't worry everyone, I have got a system." But sadly it didn't work, and the whole thing went more tits up than Dolly Parton swimming backstroke. Which I'm here all all week, and I think we have to start learning lessons from all this. We have to start, you know, the dangers of too much debt. We must learn this. We learned this from the American mortgage sector that seemed to kick this whole thing off, and a very important lesson from that. And that lesson is that if you do lend a lot of money to people who have absolutely no way of paying that money back, then conceivably they might not pay that money back. Now, this is the kind of thing we can only learn by trial and error, isn't it? It's very much like when you slam your testicles in a car door. Yeah. Until you actually do it, you don't know for sure whether or not it will hurt. And you cannot build the global economy on hypothetically painful testicles, as John Maynard Keynes himself once said. And Adam Smith, the celebrity 18th century economist, and please pay attention, I've read nearly all of Adam Smith's Wikipedia entry. He wrote about the invisible hand as supposed to guide the financial markets, make sure nothing goes too far wrong, kind of self-regulating, benevolent force, this invisible hand, nudging things in the right direction. Now, this is all very well in theory, but there is a problem with this, and I think we all have to ask ourselves a very important question, and do try to be honest with yourselves as you answer it. If you had an invisible hand, what would you do with it? And here we see the problem in the system we've been relying on. Basic human nature. We would nick stuff, we would flick invisible V signs at people we don't like, and we would grope things. And that is exactly what the financial markets have been doing. So I think we need to reassess our priorities as a planet, because there's huge inequalities in the world. Maybe this is nature's way for the world to be unequal. You look at the natural world, it's full of inequalities. For example, when a giraffe dies, flies swarm all around its corpse. But when I squashed a fly in my window the other day, not a single giraffe to be seen. Is that what you people call justice? But we've kind of lost our moral leadership in the world. You know, we've seen this with our economic mistakes and our environmental mistakes and you know, and the wars we've been conducting, and we've lost the moral high ground. And we see it by our complicity in torture, for example, and waterboarding. Are you familiar with waterboarding? For those who don't know what waterboarding is, it's a torture technique that was being used under the previous American administration, involving being strapped to a board, having cellophane wrapped around your head, and then simulated drowning, proving that there is, as ever, a very fine line between systematic torture and stag do. And really the only discernible difference is the absence of forced bonhomie. But it's a military thing. I think that's a better line than you're giving it credit for, but we can haggle. But anyway, it's a military thing, and military things often trickle down and benefit us civilians. We've seen this with things like satellite navigation, and now enables us ordinary civilians to drive 60 miles in the wrong direction without having to blame ourselves. So we all benefit from these things, and it'll be the same with waterboarding. It'll trickle down into everyday life. And I found out just the other day, in fact, how much we could all benefit from waterboarding when I lost my keys, and I just couldn't for the life of me remember where I last had them. So I thought, I will learn from Bush-era America, and I will torture this information out of my own subconscious. So I waterboarded myself quite aggressively over several hours. Eventually, of course, I cracked. And as if by magic, I suddenly remembered where my keys were. I'd just left them in the wrong pocket. Because I disapprove of torture and abide by the Geneva Convention, I wasn't able to use that information. So I had to sleep in the street. And because we like to think we have a moral superiority in these, can we look at a country like Iran, for example, and to our Western tastes, we think Iran has quite appallingly discriminatory attitudes towards homosexuality. Because I read on the internet that in Iran, sodomy is punishable by death, but lesbianism only gets 100 lashes. Now that is feminism gone mad, isn't it? Come on, let's have some equality in this world. I love equality so much that I will not rest until all Iranian lesbians are dead. But I think we must start learning these lessons, and we have to accept some complicity in this. We've enjoyed the boom times, and I guess we all knew the bubble would burst. We were just hoping it wouldn't burst until after we were dead, but sadly it did. And as my grandmother used to say to me, she used to say to me, Andy, do not complain about being eaten by a horse if you've chosen to play polo dressed as a sugar lump. That's a sage lesson for us all. And also, you have to ask, how often must these same mistakes be made? You know, how often must something recur before people cease passing it off as coincidence? And the answer to me is 50 times. Because 49 times I've now electrocuted myself. If it happens again, I will stop dropping my toaster in the bath to see if I can make crunchy water. It's time the politicians of the world learned that self-same lesson. So I'll leave you with that thought. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Good night.